Stars are rising, days are breaking in my soul. Pale mist is softly fading, pale mist is softly fading, pale mist is softly fading, days are breaking in my soul. Oh, where are our dear mothers? Oh, where are our dear fathers? Oh, where are our dear loved ones? Days are breaking in my soul. They are sowing seeds of gladness. They are sowing seeds of gladness. They are sowing seeds of gladness. Days are breaking in my soul.
Welcome, friends, gathered in the sanctuary, on Zoom, and later on our YouTube channel. It is so good to be together. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Franklin, to the mountains of western North Carolina and northeast Georgia, and the ancestral land of the Cherokee. We're a lay-led congregation of progressive minds and caring connections. My name is Mary Teslow, and I'm pleased to be your service leader this morning, along with readings by Ron Erbs. We extend a warm welcome to those who may be visiting with us today for the first time or returning after a while. We are so glad you're with us and look forward to getting to know you better. There'll be an opportunity to introduce yourself later in the service if you would like. Please rise now in body or spirit. As we gather in community, we take a moment to greet each other on Zoom and here in the sanctuary, affectionately the Zoomies and the Roomies. So the Roomies turn to your right and wave to our Zoomies over there, and they'll wave back. There they are. They'll wave back to us. Fabulous. And now, Spirit of Life, our gathering song in Spanish and English.
Yes, now we're going to try to do our sign language signs, if you remember them. I got maybe 3/4 of them. And throw in any Spanish phrases that you see. I think we've got words on the screen.
Yeah.
Give it a shot. Some of y'all are more multilingual.
Oh
next week I'll find the one with the words on the screen. I thought this was it. Sorry, guys.
Oh, yay, we did really well. Yay. Yeah.
I like her free, though.
Yeah, that was really nice. I like that one. We appreciate our Sunday service team, Warren, Becky, who's on taking a little rest, Ben, Edgar, Jude, Jill, and Penny on Zoom, Angie, our greeter, and Karen helping with hospitality. Anecdotal reports indicate that COVID and other viruses are on the rise in our area. Please feel free to make use of the mask at the entrance and social distance or participate on Zoom if you wish to keep yourself and all of us healthy and safe. Please respect those around you. Also, there's a board meeting today beginning at 1, both on-site and online, and certainly open to all. Are there any announcements on Zoom? We are good there. Are there any announcements in the sanctuary? Bonnie, please. Oh, yay, a bunch of stuff. Yay, hooray.
I'll try not to talk too fast. I don't want to take too much time. So many of you know that I had the whooping cough, which I did not want, and it was absolutely miserable for a long time. So anyway, I just brought something that talks about being protected with the Tdap shot. So I'm going to put this,
Bonnie, yes, stay close to the mic.
sorry. I think I will leave this in the foyer. If anybody wants to glance at it on their way out or something, they can. I do believe in science and in vaccines, and I heartily recommend it for this pertussis. I have some wildflower seeds that are honeybee wildflower seed mix. And I'm going to also leave that right by the flyer out there. Anybody would like to take one for some reason, you're welcome to. And now, greeters and hospitality. I think we have greeters for most of the Sundays, the rest of this month. But there are openings for hospitality, maybe one greeter slot. So I was going to ask anybody here today if they could stop by, look at the table by the bulletin board downstairs, and see if they might be able to help out and fill in some of those slots. And the last thing is, I'm happy to say that we are having our first auction here in 15 years, since we were having all kinds of fundraisers to build this building. And we don't have in our budget funds for child programming, and now that we are starting to get children, it's very important that we can raise money for that. And so, many of you know, July 27th, that is a Saturday at 3 o'clock, we're going to host an auction here. It's a silent auction, a table auction. Bidding will probably cease about 4:30. So it's not a very long time, but we'll have some refreshments, and it should be great fun. It's for our UU community, members, friends, and friends of friends, and people that we would like to invite. And the reason it's not open to the general public, like in the newspaper putting a word out, is because a lot of the events are going to take place in people's homes. So just for that reason, it's not wide open to the public. And if you have something that you would like to donate, I have auction donation forms today, and I'm going to ask that you bring those next Sunday, the 21st, because we can begin to set up then. And to do that setup, I have, I'd love to do this all by myself, but I cannot do an auction by myself. So here is a specific task-oriented sign-up sheet. If you could glance at this, and I'll also have both of these down by the bulletin board downstairs. And if you have any questions, please see me. I'm Bonnie. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. Yay. Please be sure to check the UU View and our website to keep up to date. Our fellowship is a light for liberal religion in the mountains that values diversity and the richness it brings to our community. Our celebration of diversity is reflected in the variety of our Sunday services, and we hope today's service enriches your journey of discovery. Unitarian Universalists draw inspiration from many sources. This morning, Dr. Enrique Gómez joins us to explore two worldviews of the cosmos with a message titled, The Life of Mountains and Stars. Our opening honors Western thought and our closing, indigenous ways of knowing. As we light our chalice, we're reminded that the fire within us is the same fire that illuminates the universe. It is our reminder that all is connected, even though the space of the void is vast, and our experience here is just a blip in the cosmic timeline. This flame is our promise that in our smallness and our short time on this earth, that we live intently and deeply with love for one another, with honesty and integrity, to be guided by rational thought and critical thinking, and with a sense of shared responsibility. I invite Ron to share opening words by Carl Sagan, the 1981 Humanist of the Year.
The cosmos is all that is or ever will be. Our feeblest contemplations of the cosmos stir us. There is a tingling in the spine, a catch in the voice, a faint sensation, as if a distant memory of falling from a great height. We know we are approaching the greatest of mysteries.
Thank you, Ron. Our opening hymn is number 203 in the Western hymn tradition, All Creatures of the Earth and Sky.
All creatures of the earth and sky, come together and lift your voices high. Alleluia, alleluia. Bright burning sun with golden beam, soft shining moon with silver gleam. Alleluia, 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 alleluia.
Swift rushing wind so wild and strong, white clouds that sail in heaven along. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Fair rising morning, praise rejoice. High stars of evening find a voice. Hallelujah, hallelujah,
We are delighted to welcome back our friend Enrique Gómez. Dr. Enrique Alberto Gómez is an associate professor of physics and astronomy at Western Carolina University, where he studies supernova and stellar outflows. He has also done research on atmospheric cosmic ray interactions with atmospheric balloons and the teaching and learning of physics and astronomy. He received his PhD from the University of Alabama, doing his dissertation on gamma ray burst and supernova. He also enjoys running half marathons and trail running. Please join me in welcoming our friend Enrique Gómez.
Thank you so much, and thank you again for the kind invitation to come in and speak to you once more here in your religious spiritual home. I feel compelled this morning to condemn yesterday's assassination attempts of former President Trump, which also resulted in the loss of life. Political violence has no place in a democracy. It is at odds with our shared moral and constitutional values and pushes further away from the world that we want to live together. Of mountains and stars, astronomers everywhere, including myself, are awaiting in anticipation the eruption of a dwarf nova called T Corona Borealis, also dubbed the Blaze Star. I regularly observe supernova and nova like this, and I usually do them either through a telescope with my own eyes or looking through the eyepiece or taking images from this using robotic telescopes. But I've never seen one with my naked eye. And there's a chance that we might see something like this this summer, but I cannot tell you exactly when. When T Corona Borealis erupts, it will be seen with the naked eye, and it will be as bright as the North Star Polaris. Would last only a few weeks, and I'm looking forward to this. The last time this happened was 78 years ago. I tried observing it last night. I was doing a telescope observing session for the public last night, so we're excited about this. But today, what I'm doing is that I want to think a little bit more about the lives of stars, and not just how, but where we observe them. The telescopes that I use on a regular basis to teach and to do research are in places like Chile's Atacama Desert, which is the home of the Diaguitas people, an indigenous group. Also, Meckering Observatory in far western Australia, where you have the lands of the Ballardong Noongar Aboriginal Australian groups, and also Haleakala Observatory on Maui Islands, where Native Hawaiians have claims. What I'm going to do, if it's okay, Ben, is that I have some slides, and I'm not going to talk about every slide, so feel free to kind of like move the slides along, and I may comment very briefly over things as they come along. All right? So, Indigenous and First Nations people in the past 20 years have begun to raise objections about science projects on their land. So keep moving with the slides as they go on. Won't talk about every single one. The most notable example of this is the summit of Mauna Kea, a dormant volcano in the Big Island of Hawaii, because it is the premier astronomical observatory site in the Northern Hemisphere. There are currently 12 astronomical observatories on this site, with a proposal to build a 13th one, the 30 meters telescopes. So I'm showing, for instance, the Gemini telescopes there in the summit. Massive protests and current injunctions currently have the 30-meter telescope construction on hold, with Native Hawaiian groups sustaining their objections to any more development of Mauna Kea. As this picture shows, I have been in the summit of Mauna Kea, and I have trembled in awe, not just at the instruments, but the very location. When the sun rises, the first place that its rays touch anywhere in Polynesia is the volcanic cone crowned by an Ahu stone monument, and you'll see it in a few slides. Mauna Kea is regarded by many Native Hawaiians as a person in her own right, as the abode of Poliahu, the personhood of mountain snows, feeding the streams at the mountain's base. When I visited this site, a kumu, or indigenous knowledge keeper, instructed us not to remove a rock or collect any volcanic ash, as this would be akin to stealing human remains from a family's burial. The highest lake in the Pacific is near its summit, Lake Waiau, which is the place where families bring the umbilical cords and afterbirth of newborn babies, linking them to a mountain that, if measured from the very bottom of the Pacific Ocean, would be the tallest mountain on Earth. I'm a professional astronomer, and I often encounter dismissive comments from colleagues who I respect, accusing Native Hawaiian groups of fabricating cultural practices driven by anti-Western, anti-science, anti-colonial activism. And this happened to me at a conference just this past month. Here we have an ahu on top of one of the volcanic cones over there, that stone monument. And we can probably close the slides at this point right there, so I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I myself am conflicted. I teach science that was made possible by studies carried at Mauna Kea. The textbooks that I have used have images created on the sites. I have been introducing students to astronomy classes to the use of robotic telescopes, not just in Hawaii, but also Australia, Chile, Canada, South Africa, and the Canary Islands, all sites of indigenous nations displaced by colonial projects from European nations. My students and I have greatly benefited in our learning and our productivity from the installation of scientific instruments on indigenous lands. The movement by Native Hawaiians to stop further development and decommissioning of observatories at Mauna Kea has helped highlight the dark side of Western astronomy. It may seem that of all the physical sciences, astronomy presents itself as the most laudable, noble, entirely driven by the quest to understand humanity's place in the universe and the origin of the cosmos. And of course, I started as a kid reading Carl Sagan and watching the series Cosmos over there. And because I introduced it, I was introduced in Spanish dub version of the Cosmos series. For me, he was always Carl Sagan. But anyway, astronomy does have a cost. The most egregious example is the tremendous carbon footprint of sending scientific instruments to space, like the James Webb and Hubble Space Telescope, or the deployment of scientific experiments in vulnerable locations like Antarctica or the summit of remote mountains with fragile ecosystems. There's also the jet fuel travel to so much academic travel, and the increased use of energy for the computation of so much astronomy. Astronomers are energy hogs. Also, we find a strong overlap between the development of imaging technology in astronomy and military applications. The same infrastructure needed to build observatories in orbit or at remote locations is the same needed to project military and economic power all over the planet. Why should indigenous people care about the science that I do if so much of it replicates in its implementation the same colonial patterns that decimated numbers and extinguished most of their languages, sovereignty, and culture? When I first came to teach at Western Carolina University, I knew that my work here needed to be grounded in an understanding that I am on lands forcefully taken from Cherokee people less than 200 years ago. The very classroom that I teach astronomy is built right on top the house foundation of a village called Two Sparrows Town, Tali Chishquayahi. I know this because I was in the committee that designed the building. I was at the archaeological explorations on the site. And I would like to help support efforts to revitalize Cherokee language. And one obvious way for me to do this is to translate my astronomy studies into Cherokee. And as I started to study Cherokee on my own, I had a realization that stopped me cold. First, the English language has the largest vocabulary of any language in the world, driven mostly by technical and scientific terms. That being said, Cherokee has 3 times as many verbs as English does. This is because the bulk of a meaning of a sentence in Cherokee is done by the verb, unlike English and Spanish, where the bulk of the meaning is done by subject-noun words. For instance, the Cherokee word for water is ama. The Cherokee word for salt is ama. What's the difference? The verbs that you use to talk about liquids are different from the verbs that you use to talk about granular substances. And hence, there is never a confusion amongst Cherokee speakers. What does ama refers to? The Cherokee word for sun is nudo. The Cherokee word for moon is nudo. What's the difference? Verb forms tell you how and where you know what something that you're talking about is. So a Cherokee speaker is never confused as to what nudo refers to. For stars, the Cherokee word is nikwasi or nikwashi. Just like the mound that is about a mile or so away from where you and I are sitting. And my colleagues, Brett Riggs and Jane Eastman, have been documenting how mounds here in Macon County, Nikwasi Mound, Cowie Mound, Watauga Mound, have relationships to the rising and settings of astronomical objects. The phrase in Cherokee, Ainokwishi, Chi shtigo tia. The verb, shtigo, refers to a person or the action of looking at the verb because it means we see stars. Not a thing that is static or granular or long or liquid. This is a problem because the best verb to describe what my research says about the stars is that stars are liquid. Well, not really, they are plasma, but hey, that's the way that I would talk about it. And this is a problem because if I were to translate my research into Cherokee, I would actually be doing balance to the language and centuries, if not millennia, of cultural understanding about what these stars are. Because in the Cherokee language and culture, stars are people. So I myself cannot translate my own research in Cherokee. At best, the project needs to be a community effort shaped by consensus of shared meanings. And that language could shape the thought of human communities in such divergent ways. It is a source of deep awe for me. Tyson Yuccan Porta, an Appalachia Aboriginal, a lecturer of indigenous knowledges at Deakin University in Australia, points that we Westerns are deeply interested in the products of indigenous thought. We collect Cherokee baskets. We purchase kachina dolls, Hopi kachina dolls. We visit archaeological sites. We read ethnographies. We attend powwows. On some of us even actively appropriate indigenous practices such as making medicine bundles and building sweat lodges. But if we were to meaningfully apply and reflect the grammar of indigenous thinking into, say, our finances, or how we raise children, or whether to decide to build a building on a site or not, we would balk. The product of indigenous thinking is not the same as indigenous thinking itself. So this poses a question to the Western-trained post-colonial astronomer, to engage with the subject in astronomy in a way that would be meaningful to the colonized people on whose lands we build observatories. We must be ready to contribute to a continuity of culture where stars are indeed persons. And I will not mince words. What I'm referring to here is essentially animism. Can animism be invoked with our present understanding of stars or mountains? But I also want to be clear that my goals here are not to reconcile indigenous ways of knowing with Western science, not to seek scientific validation of indigenous practices. And I have to be also very careful about what I mean by animism. There is one way in which referring to elements in nature as animistic persons is a matter of wordplay. You can googly eyes on your coffee cup and address it formally and give it a name every morning. And if you love your coffee, you may very well do that already. Not because I make a subjective language choice does that make something a person, whether it be a doll, a cup, or a star. Let us consider, though, seriously, animism as a worldview where the universe is filled with persons, but only some of them happen to be human. There's a concept that has started to gain traction in popular philosophy in the last few years. It's not particularly a new one, and that is panpsychism. Panpsychism posits the consciousness is a fundamental and ubiquitous feature of all matter of the universe. To parse this a little bit more, we have to do some philosophy homework, right? Where we present different ontologies. Throat clearing, fancy word, right? Essentially, ontology is about talking about categories of things that we consider to be valid and real in discussion. Most of us operate under a materialist metaphysics, where if consciousness exists at all, it is an emergent epiphenomenon that gives rise from the interaction of hundreds of billions of neurons. It is the interactions that give rise to consciousness. A single cell or a single atom would not host consciousness by themselves because they are not the product of multiple interactions. And this is in sharp contrast with idealist metaphysics that essentially posits that consciousness is actually a primary category of existence. And then matter is an epiphenomenon. It emerges out of consciousness. It doesn't precede consciousness. Philosopher Bertrand Russell and Alfred North Whitehead, which helped shape a lot of the theology of Unitarian Universalism. Whitehead is known as also Obama's favorite theologian. They introduced, over 50 years ago, the concept of panprotopsychism as a proposition that matter may not have full experience of cognition, but nevertheless has elements of what we call proto-mental. In this picture, a stone in a driveway could have proto-mental elements. It wouldn't have organs to perceive the world outside, except for sound vibration. It wouldn't have neural networks that will grant it the ability to reason, nor do rudimentary calculations. It could not know what 2 times 4 would be, but rather remain in a state of perpetual, blissful contemplation of its own awareness. To invoke a vulgar expression, the stone would be quite literally stoned. Or can it? Now, consider any of the mountains that are around us at this moment right now. And if you have ever driven through any of these mountain roads where you have a cut into the mountain itself, you would see that these mountains are rich with veins of quartz and mica. These veins can hold and conduct electric charges. Some parts may even behave like semiconductor circuit elements, just like the CPUs in the vast, extensive facilities that host AI applications. So in principle, a mountain could exhibit the same reasoning capacity as an AI. Moreover, if you can consciously change the distribution of ions within you, you can change your chemistry. You could shape the patterns of erosion, making, for instance, nutrients available or withhold nutrients from moss or trees growing on you. If this is true, then a mountain has a capacity for moral agency. Maybe. I don't know. It's just speculation. A star also has a rich, complex web of magnetic fields spanning the entire volume, and some of these magnetic field structures find analogs in circuit elements, just like an AI. But here's the catch. Unlike you and me and the AI we can access on our phones, the time scale for a mountain or a star to resolve a thought could be hundreds of thousands of years. So practically, our experience of a conscious mountain and stars could be indistinguishable from the inert matter that a materialist metaphysics would propound. Moreover, for stars, light and communication can take hundreds, if not thousands, or tens of thousands of years in our own Milky Way galaxy. Do we still have an ethical obligation to the mountain? Is it worthwhile communicating with a star if we will not get a response in hundreds of years? Here's a related question. Is a human that is alive but in deep sleep still a person? Is the personhood contingent on their likelihood of becoming awake? Or a human being able to respond to you within a reasonable amount of time? Is a human in a coma still a person? It's a related question. And here we encounter a neurological chauvinism that comes into an ethical reasoning. We privilege and grant personhoods to those systems that can mimic us and can respond meaningfully within a certain time scale. Moreover, the Western thought sets us on an equation where personhood equates with consciousness, and consciousness, we think about this as computational reasoning. But computational reasoning is not a requirement for personhood in indigenous ways of knowing. Instead, we often find personhood comes from having an inner reality whose contents can never be really fully known. But this reality is suggested through manifestation of the endless complexity and creativity that we see in persons. Personhood as a concept is useful insofar as it flags the possibilities for relationships between consciousness that can co-create together. But can we be in relationship with non-human persons that operate in timescales that are radically different from our own? And I want to suggest instead that communication in a form of language that can be collapsed into a representation of, say, individual words, symbols, or zeros and ones must not be the defining characteristics of relationship. We live in a very curious time, don't we? The rapid introduction of AI technologies is destabilizing in part because we are lacking a general framework for how we should generally approach non-human intelligences or non-human persons. Jeffrey Kripal, a professor of comparative religions in Rice University, offers a metaphor for the experience of encountering the radically different intelligences. And that is the metaphor of the two-way mirror. If you've ever seen someone through a two-way mirror, you may have had that disconcerting view of seeing your own reflection superimposed on that other person. For Kripal, the encounter with the other, human or non-human, is always a reflection. We see others as we are as much as they could ever be themselves. Between humans, we are not aware of this process of reflection because our neurobiology is so similar. I have a pretty good idea that my own internal theory of mind can actually give some insight about what your internal state is going to be. Our encounters with non-humans will always cast us in anthropomorphic projections of our own theory of mind. What makes the encounter with the other, human or non-human, different from an encounter with inert objects is also the engagement makes us understand ourselves better. You cannot be in a long-term relationship without discovering something about the inner workings of your own self. You cannot raise a child without yourself gaining insight into your own upbringing. You cannot keep a pet without you becoming aware about all the different ways you can perceive and understand the environment around you. And I think that the work of people who are developing a new field, which has been dubbed the anthropology of the more than human, Eduardo Kohn, in his book, How Forests Think, makes the observation that interspecies communication, more often than not, takes the form of semiotic rather than symbolic. You and I are communicating right now through processes of symbolic representations using sounds, words, symbols, all of it. Semioticity makes meaning through gestures, impressions, muscle memory, mirror neurons, sense, and imitation that map into extended structures in our own neural systems, or neural-like networks, for instance, the root of plants or fungi networks on the ground. And we can achieve neuroaffective attuning. We can tune into each other across species and across intelligences through that. Semioticity is how you even before we finish this talk, you have already communicated to me that you indeed are listening and catching this through gestures, through hums, through nodding, through your posture of your language. And you're communicating it not just to me, but to everybody around us, which means that you and I are kind of co-creating an experience of my own talk as we go along. When Kohn explores how indigenous people of the Amazon, such as the Runa people in the Ecuador, conceptualize personhood, it is the semiotic field of shared meaning that creates relationality and establishes personhood, not the ability to conjugate human phrases. In preparing for this talk, I made a choice. I decided to take my own admonition seriously about not appropriating indigenous thought, but rather be inspired by indigenous thinking. In so doing, I started from the proposition that I myself cannot make decisions about the personhood either of mountains or stars. Nor can I expect that this would emerge from conversations with other humans, but I did ask an AI what it thought. I did. Right, of course it says that, I'm not going to quote the AI entirely, thank you ChatGPT. Essentially it says like, no, I ask it, are you conscious? No, I'm not really conscious. But of course, the AI is being fed in large language models from academic papers that have the consensus that AIs are not really persons and they are not conscious. Well, what is it going to do? But I needed to engage with being able to open to the possibility that communication will not take the form of a thundering English sentence coming through a burning bush, but rather through a field of semiotic gestures embedded meaning in the environment, and that I will be a co-participant in the creation of meaning with a mountain by experiencing essentially in a way, a two-way conversation, I guess, with my own experience and my own consciousness. So I needed to go and ask a mountain what it thinks about the problem of the personhood of stars and planets. And this is how I did it. And I'll bring my answers back to you. So one morning, I climbed a mountain that overlooks the town of Silva called Double Top. It's wonderful in the east. Right? When the sun rises over Silva on the equinoxes, spring and autumn equinoxes, rises right on top of Double Top. When I went up there to close to the top, I found a tiny spring nested deep inside a dark rhododendron cove. And as I sat down, I meditated for an hour, just quiet, listened to myself, listen to everything around it, and just be quiet and see what happened. At some point, a ray of morning sunlight entered that tiny little cove and illuminated a single dewdrop clinging precariously from the very end of a rhododendron leaf. The sunlight was diffracted in the water drop, breaking the white light into its constituent colors so that the dewdrop was scintillating beautifully like a jewel, cycling through electric red, yellow, indigo, green, just like the starlight twinkles as seen from the atmosphere, from the bottom of the atmosphere. And I found myself moved by this. Okay, how delicate this was, how ordinary this was, this event, and yet with it be so pregnant with potential meaning and insight to answer my question. And reflecting on this, as I'm looking at this very delicate dewdrop scattering the light from the sun, I was arrested by the realization that despite the difference in size between a star and a dewdrop, and considering the largest and smallest structures that we have, the edge and radius of the visible universe, or the smallest subatomic particle, at the very end, a star and a dewdrop are really not that different in size. And I was also struck by the misapprehension that many people have about the light that we see from stars, because we may think that there is a single ray of light that has left a star and has reached your eyeball, and that's how you perceive it. It is limiting, I believe, Because it will be more complete to say that at any moment in time, a star emits a sphere of light that propagates away from it very much like, say, ripples around a rock in a pond propagate around it. Every element of light inside that sphere propagates at the speed of light away from the stars. And what happens is that when we interact with the sphere of light, we perceive it as a point of light. It is also a mistake to think that there is no longer an ongoing connection between the atoms of the stars and the light that they emit once that light has left. And every element of light that is encompassed within that expanding sphere. We know this because we have established a phenomenon called quantum entanglement. When I observe the light of a star on my retina, this establishes the polarization of light in a way that wasn't there before, which instantly determines the state of the stellar atom that emitted that particle of light, a photon. And it also affects another photon of light somewhere in that shell traveling directly in the opposite direction. And if that light traveled 100 light years, right, for 100 years to reach my eyeball, that affects a particle of light that might be 200 light years away. And it may seem very confusing and difficult to understand and all of that. And hey, I am confused too. Because what's happening here is a deep mystery. Unless you think that this is too esoteric and too confused, this exact same process of quantum entanglement is the basis of the field of quantum cryptography, which has industrial and military applications. So underneath this, there is a deep, profound mystery that is currently underpinning our understanding of the universe and has thought-provoking consequences. If we can be affected by the light that we see from the stars, our action of observing it can actually even affect the stars themselves, even in the most minute ways. And this, which opens the possibility of relationality between stars and humans and the recognition of the personhood of stars. And this is not to say that the light that we receive can be encoded with a series of zeros and ones and have quantum two-way speech communication like you can have on your phone. It's not like that. So then, what is the meaning of this relationality if it cannot be collapsed into English sentences? And I want to offer to you that the meaning can be encountered through the experience of awe that we experience when we stargaze. Pursuing the experience of awe may seem like a self-indulgent, frivolous pursuit. Dr. Dasher Deltoner at the Greater Good Science Center at Berkeley has spent decades investigating the neurobiology of emotions and researched how the experience of awe is encoded in our bodies. Experiences of awe, according to Dr. Keltner, stimulate the vagus nerve, a bundle of 100,000 nerves that regulate our heart rate variability, blood pressure, whole body inflammation responses, stress, mood, digestive function, and harmonizes our gut-brain interaction. There is now abundant literature on the importance of vagus nerve stimulation. When we experience something awesome, like an eclipse or an amazing sunset, we experience the contraction of our rector pili muscles that also causes the skin to form something that we recognize as goosebumps. The same pili muscles contraction also causes our hair to stand up. We do this when we are surprised also by other beings. Jane Goodall first reported that chimpanzees will have their hair stand up when they visit and purposely gaze at a waterfall. Bears, especially in these regions, have been known to visit the very tops and gaze at sunsets. Prairie dogs do this communal sun-gazing thing during sunrise and sunsets, and their hair stand up. We are hardwired to seek experiences of awe that also stimulates the vagus nerve. We experience awe when we are at the presence of a birth or a death or the simple wonder and generosity that we often observed in toddlers. We experience awe in the contemplation of starlight or a mountain range. Regular excursions in the pursuit of awe is a medicinal practice encoded in the ritual storytelling under starlight, documented in Aboriginal, Hopi, and Native Hawaiian cultures. The pursuit of awe is an expression of love in the encounter with the other. In closing, fragment of a poem by the 12th century Sufi poet Jalaluddin Rumi. Love is lightning and the awe that we respond with. Stars burn clear all night till dawn. Do that yourself. And a spring will rise in the dark with water your deepest thirst is for. And here concludes the message. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
We are so grateful to you, Enrique, for guiding us in the exploration of these two worldviews and gifting us so much to ponder and to discuss. So we look forward to discussing with you later and in an ongoing way. I invite Ron up to the walk-up mic to add to our contemplation with another quote from Carl Sagan.
The absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. The absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence.
Thank you so much. We're so grateful to live in covenant with our fellowship family and for all the diverse gifts of time, talent, and treasure that are given by so many in love and in hope. And to thank Laura for the beautiful flowers this morning. They are absolutely a gorgeous addition to our service. And now please join me in the dedication of our gifts. Here we go. Gifts given in love and hope, continuous cycle of love and hope. May it be so. Thank you for your support. All financial gifts are appreciated at the sanctuary entry, where there are also stamped addressed envelopes by mail or electronically. There's also our celebration jar and a basket for coffee hour donations. As we prepare for Joyce and Concerns knows that they will be edited out before they're put online. A last pebble as we remember those who have spoken, those who have been named, and those we hold in silence in our hearts. And now I invite you into a minute of silence. You can choose to meditate, pray, reflect on something you've heard today, or simply sit in community silently with others. I'll bring you back with the chimes. Our closing honors the indigenous worldview. The Andes on the Pacific coast of South America are home to indigenous observatories, as well as many more recent Western observatories. It is also the home of the Andean condor, the largest flying bird in the world, but its population is considered vulnerable. It is a central figure in the folklore and mythology of the Andean regions and has been depicted in Andean art since around 2500 BCE. The condor is a symbol of power and health and ruled the upper world, acting as an intermediary with the world of spirits and the sun god Inti. The Incas believed the condor brought the sun into the sky each morning and was the messenger of the gods. El Condor Pasa, Spanish for the flight of the condor, is an orchestral piece by a Bolivian composer, Daniel Alomía Robles, written in 1913 and based on traditional Andean music, specifically folk music in Peru. Since then, it's been estimated that around the world, more than 4,000 versions of the melody have been produced, along with 300 sets of lyrics. In 2004, Peru declared the song to be a part of its national cultural heritage, and it's now considered their second national anthem. You likely recognize it from the 1970 cover by Simon and Garfunkel with English lyrics by Paul Simon on his Bridge Over Troubled Water album. Their version is called El Condor Pasa, If I Could. But this morning we're going to enjoy an Andean folk song version of El Condor Pasa. Our chalice extinguishing is adapted from the Reverend George Brooks. As we extinguish our chalice, may we be reminded that we are part and participants of the cosmos. May the love that gives to life its beauty, the reverence that gives to life its sacredness, and the purposes that give to life its deep significance be strong within each of us and lead us into the ever-deepening relationships with the whole of creation. May it be so. Thank you for joining us today. Following service, those on Zoom are invited to continue the conversation, and those in the sanctuary are invited to enjoy social time in Celebration Hall. If you're a visitor, there are red cups that'll help us find you to get to know you better. Next week, we welcome singer-songwriter Michael Reno Harrell for a service titled, Here's to the Ones Who Show Us How It's Done, followed by a concert here in the sanctuary at 2:30. We have a preview song, Remind Me Why I Came Into the Room.
Sounds pretty good. Well, thank you for coming. How about Ben? How about that? I'd like to dedicate this song to David. My knees both pop like pistol shots, and my face has lines, and my hands have spots, and my eyebrows look like some old witch's broom. I sip inshore instead of wine, 4:30's now my supper time. Remind me why I came into this room. I got receding hair, I got receding gums. My doctor can't be 21. When did my favorite snack become a prune? Long underwear, that's how I roll. I once was cool, now I'm just cold. Remind me why I came into this room. Getting old's not for the faint of heart. My resume may soon include greeter at Walmart. Well, I may not have a hip tattoo, but my hip replacement scar's cool. Remind me why I came into this room. cholesterol count is downright scary. I recall when movies came with a cartoon. My sugar's high, my blood pressure's soaring, my back is screaming and my ears are roaring. Remind me why I came into this room. Getting old's not for the faint of heart. See now, my wife don't trust my driving, and I don't trust a fart. Well, it may sound crude, but I could read an entire novel while I pee. Remind me why I came into this room. No, I'm serious, I don't remember. Remind me why I came into this room. But you're gonna have to speak up. Remind me why I came into this room.
Wonderful. Please rise in body or spirit. Those in the sanctuary may choose to hold hands. And our covenant, for our covenant. Get everyone holding their hands where they want, if they want to be. There we go. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and community is its goal. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth and love, and to help one another. So may it be. Now we'll wave goodbye to your right, to our folks on Zoom. Bye, guys. It's been wonderful to be together. Go in peace. The service has ended.